if people don't feel like you're listening and that there's a connection between the employer and the purpose of the organization and what they do, they're going to leave.
Welcome to GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, aka the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, best-selling author, and certified self-leadership trainer with the John Maxwell team, Dom Brightmon. And this is the podcast where authors from around the world help you realize that success is tangible. You'll leave with at least one new tip of inspiration or information or even motivation every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. Now let's get on with the show. Today's episode is sponsored by the brand new Northbound to Your Success shop, where you can buy the wonderful logo, advance others to advance yourself in t-shirt form, mug form, heck, even a phone case if you like a phone case. Either way, click on shop on goingnorthpodcast.com, cop a t-shirt, hoodie or two, and be sure to tag the host when you do, so that way I can give you a shout out on a future episode of the podcast. Now let's get down to business with the episode for real. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as GMP, the Great, Glorious, and Glamorous, it's the Going North Podcast. And we got another super special, awesome human for you today, courtesy of my good buddy, who is a freaking super special, awesome human that guested on this show in the past and responsible for some other super special, awesome humans to jump on the show. Miss Tammy Matheny, that's right. Miss Trademark herself, Miss TM herself. And I don't even think she does transcendental meditation, but hey, we'll go with it just for the TM purposes, because today's guest in particular, she's a fellow Christian, y'all, that's right. And we're both part of teams that start with the letter J. And they sound the same too. They're Johns, y'all, because today's guest believes in people and works with individuals, teams, and organizations to help them grow. She's a wife and a mom of four, as well as an executive coach and a human resources and development executive who builds award-winning employment brands, world-class, you heard that right, folks, world-class corporate universities and transformational leadership development programs. So let's give it up for the amazing, patient, and kind Amy P. Kelly. How you doing today, Amy?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you?
Doing wonderful too. That's right. Capital W's all day. All right. So the nonsense is working. For those who are not catching the non-video version, the audio version, she made a W with her hands. So it's like, yay, W's all day. That's right. The winning, the wonderfulness. That's right. Wednesdays, of course, you know, with me and my love of hump days and making random camel jokes every Wednesday of the week. So yeah, all the W's. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, as you know, with all introductions, they're not allowed to be 72 and a half days long. So mine fill in the cavities I may have missed about the amazing Amy herself. If there's anything else I forgot to mention, might as well fill me in. Fill not only me, but everybody else as well.
You did a great job of getting us started. I mean, that's a pretty good portrayal of the high level. And I do like that we started off with the W. So I think that's a good place to begin. A win.
That's right. Ain't a matter of when, it's win. That's right. Indeed. That's right. Indeed. Winning all day. So my goodness. So with all wins, there's usually some setbacks along the way. So my goodness. So at the age of 13, did you see yourself where you currently are today, helping all these wonderful companies and individuals become the best selves ever?
Well, my youngest son turned 13 yesterday. And you mentioned Tammy Matheny, that's the transcendental meditation specialist who, but I'll just say that all of my children have actually benefited from Tammy's books and her work in building confidence for athletes and for adults of all ages. And so when I think of 13-year-olds, I couldn't help but think of my son who turned 13 yesterday, my youngest, Samuel. And then also think about Tammy and, you know, just her work with youth and adults. And then when it comes to, was I thinking at 13 that I would do exactly what you described in the intro? No, because I didn't know that that was a career. But yes, I mean, I remember making barrettes and having a barrette business and selling things and trying to, at the time, people cared how their ponytails looked. And I was there to help them make their ponytails and their braids look the way they needed them to and get their hairs in place. So I was always kind of trying to solve problems and I loved making a business out of it. so that I could help people and do the things that I loved and enjoyed doing while being able to fund my own efforts. So I wasn't thinking in terms of the vocabulary that you just talked about, executives and human resources, but I was doing the same thing, I believe.
Doing the same thing today, metaphorically. That's right, folks. If your company's got messy hair, she can help it be a fancy ponytail, y'all. That's right.
Exactly. Calm those flyaways. Get organized. Make sure that you've got yourself a sharp focus so that you know where you're going and everybody else doesn't get distracted by the woo.
That's right, and the woo is right indeed. That's right. And I would usually joke around and say, hey, the P in Amy P. Kelly stands for ponytail, a perfect ponytail, but actually it's a deeper meaning.
Well, the P stands for quite a few things, but I like that. It could stand for ponytail, but it does. You're bringing that up, and I appreciate that. My middle name is Pauline, and I do go by Amy P. Kelly for a number of reasons, but the summary here is related to service, and my middle name is Pauline. That was my dad's mom's name, and I was named after her, Amy Pauline. And the P, when I got married, my name became Kelly. And so I had two first names, Amy Kelly. And people would say sometimes, nice to meet you, Kelly, which really didn't bother me at all. And it just made me say, I'm gonna go with my middle initial. And the benefit of that was really, I've always believed that the power is on the inside of you and everyone to fulfill their purpose. The power resides on the inside of us. And so with that P in between Amy and Kelly, the P stands for the power on the inside of you to fulfill your purpose, and all of those individuals out there listening as well. So that's Amy P. Kelly. And ponytail, I love power on the inside, ponytail, potential. There are so many fabulous P words. If you start performance and just philosophy, purpose, it's a good letter. It's a big letter.
Yeah, it's a big letter indeed. That's right. And on top of that, it also probably stands for positive leadership. So how did you end up joining the John Gordon team? Because, it's actually kind of interesting. You hosted quite a few of folks from the organization on the show, bit by bit. And it's like, I haven't even dig too much. So how did that happen?
Well, it's an amazing group of people that I'm very honored to work with. And in one of my roles as a human resources and learning and development executive, I was able to work with one of John Gordon's books, The Energy Bus. And it was a successful initiative that was summarized by the backdrop of The Energy Bus. And ultimately, John and I ended up writing The Energy Bus Field Guide, one of the books that you see, right there. That is actually a field guide, and it is a companion piece to the Energy Bus. And the intention of the field guide was to help other individuals, organizations, and teams bring that work to life inside their organizations, more power of positive leadership. And through working with John, he has written, it's over, I don't know the number right now because it keeps growing. I know it's more than 20 best-selling books about all different topics. The theme of all of it is positivity and how that can be a transformational component, a competitive advantage in your life and in your work. So yes, positive is certainly something that resonated with me before I met John, but it's a common thread in the work that we do and the way that we support the organizations that we work with.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. That good work indeed, making that tapestry of fabulosity. That's what I'm talking about with the positive leadership. Yeah, because you're right about John. My goodness, I think at least 2 to 3 books every year at this point, it feels like. Minimum.
He's definitely, that sounds about right. I don't have the exact number per year of the last few years. I've worked with him almost 6 years at this point, and there have been absolutely 1, if not 2. And I do believe there might have been 3 one year, but it's consistent outpouring of wisdom designed to help people bring more positivity to their life and work.
Oh, yeah. That's right. The good thing about his books in particular is that a lot of them are just wonderful fables with wonderful principles woven in, like a wonderful blanket to really cover you up with some good wisdom indeed. That's right. And the good news is not only was able to tag team up with them for that wonderful Energy Bus field guide, but in a way you get to paw yourself away and create your own metaphorical gospel here with this new wonderful book called Glue.
Yes. And I appreciate you mentioning that. My book Glue is about to come out, officially released on February 9th. And I wrote it in a weekend, the first draft. And it was while I was at an event. We were doing a positive leadership event and then serving a client immediately after that event, where in between the trainings and the sessions, I went back to where I was staying and just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And it was ultimately a story about some women in business that have a break in their business and their relationship and what they do in that process. Wrote it and then was just so excited about just the fact that I've never had something kind of flow through me the way that it did. I knew that any story, may or may not impact everyone that reads it, but I felt really grateful that the process was kind of unique and special. And probably 6 months into fine tuning it to put it in the type of shape to share with others and hopefully bless them with it, I was looking at, this is the book, Glue, and this is The Power of a Positive Team by John Gordon. And I use this book I have tons of these books, but this is kind of my primary one. And if you look through it, it has got a lot of stuff written in it because I use it with a lot of organizations and teams. And I came to our chapter 6, and in the first paragraph, I'd never noticed it this way, but it said, positivity is the glue in the process of building a powerful team. But to truly be a great team, you need to do more than just be positive. You need to communicate, connect, commit, and care to create meaningful relationships, strong bonds, and team unity. And I had been using that for years. It didn't mean the same thing before. It was important. But after I had written this story about bonding and uniting and a leadership development strategy based on Glue, standing for God's love unites everyone, it was just very evident to me that those two were complementary. So it's been a pleasure to see how that work is related, and it's exciting to use it in everyday life and work with people and teams.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Might as well add penmanship too, because you penned a fabulous book indeed, especially for those who are of the faith indeed. So my goodness, so with this book in particular, since you wrote it at a conference, did you have the framework of Glue in mind before the story, or did you just write the story and Glue just popped out of everything you were writing?
It just popped out. It all came within 48 hours. We were doing a training, and I went back to my room and I just couldn't sleep that night. And I started writing, and it was, as I was writing, it just became an integration of lots of kind of pivotal, painful, powerful, and important relationship moments that I'd seen and or been a part of over the last 20 years, and putting it into a story with the intention of helping others either avoid the thing in the first place of breaking apart, or going back and understanding some ways to possibly reconcile and recalibrate broken relationships, whether they're personal and or work. And it all came out at once. I didn't have an outline. I have an outline for a business book that I'm writing right now. I consider Glue to be a business book. And if you're comfortable talking about scripture and business, then you can say, hey, this is a business book. If someone isn't comfortable talking about scripture or their religion or their beliefs in business, then you might consider this a different type of book. However you categorize it, it is about what I've witnessed, but in a fictional way, coming into a story with the intent to bless others and to share the little bit that I may have learned.
I like it. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Because funny enough, the Bible and business go together because it's a multifaceted book. It's full of stories and, of course, great business practices. You look in the Proverbs, heck, even look in the wonderful Gospels. Even Jesus himself Like there's a wonderful book out there called The Man That Nobody Knows, where it talks about Jesus being a businessman and using classic examples, like even him having a tax collector. So that way, render to Caesar what is Caesar. So yeah, so it's definitely good for business indeed. Definitely good for business indeed. What was the most challenging thing about really putting the book together? Because I would imagine it would be, well, then again, just me being a random nonfiction author. And kind of hard to go into the story route. Like, what was the most challenging part about putting the book together, since it's basically telling a story?
I think with this particular story, you could go deep into every facet of how to walk through a relationship fracture, because it's so personal, and avoiding that. And it was really, John Gordon was not involved in writing the story, but I have learned so much from him that with this particular story, I took a lot of guidance from how he's told me, be simple, because you're able to reach more people by keeping it simple. And I have a real kind of normal tendency to just get into the details and go deep. And there's nothing wrong with either perspective. So when I was writing this, I had to resist urge to explain every facet of the possible responses. Some of it I actually kind of found out internally was out of I felt like it was a pride. Like I wanted to explain that I understood how people would feel on every side of the situation. And it wasn't necessary. It was more necessary to bring people into a place that was common to man, of having a relationship that was so precious, and someone doing something that hurt, that you immediately start trying to tell the story about why they would, and kind of say, like, their motives, why they're doing it, and how fast something so treasured can start to be fractured because of that battle that we all go through, the battle between listening to the voice of the enemy or the voice of truth. And so in this relationship with these two women, through that hurt, one of them immediately goes to the place of hurt and the point of view of defensiveness, and how fast that derails her maturity, her behavior, her faith, and what that does. And to answer your question, it was just, I had to avoid explaining everything, because you don't need to sometimes in stories. Stories are about, on a high level, connecting with other human beings from a macro level place of value and a common experience, and then letting people, work that out through their own lens. And so it was just harder for me, because I never expected to write something that was short and compact. And I had to work to keep that true to what I knew would be most valuable. Because detailing every single emotion of these characters wasn't the same as letting people project their own life experiences into the scenario and gain the value that way. So I hope that makes sense. But that was hard, because it was just my intentions through serving in the story were to just put everything in there. But this wasn't that type of work.
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense, because you're so right about that, especially when you read other novels. It's like, oh God, they're really going into detail, like 2 pages over a pen in a chair. Like, really? And it's like, oh, maybe I should do that. It's like, no, don't tell us about the pen. They wrote with a pen. That was it. You don't have to go into the shape of the pen. It's okay. And the details and all the emotions that were running wild in one human, even though it affected multiple humans. But yeah, definitely, folks should definitely pick up this magical book indeed, and share with some wonderful fellow super special awesome humans. So since you've been on this little podcast tour to promote the wonderful book and the work that you're doing, what's the question that you wish you'd be asked more often?
I think you've kind of asked it, but why did you write a book? And because the answer to that question, at least, is important to me, because I believe it's important to humanity, which is, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. The things that I've seen in just my line of work, what value in that? What has God worked out in me that could possibly be of service to someone else? And when you ask, why did you write it? I wrote it because I want less fractured relationships. I want to see more unity. not because I need to see it, but what I mean is in the world, every time there's a break, we all suffer for it. And every time someone, decides to bond and to understand another person and to honor what they need above themselves, we all grow. And so I wrote it to share the things that I've seen and personally experienced that were painful, that could possibly help others. And I really love that in other people too. The other books that I've read, the people you mentioned, Tammy, yourself, we're really doing this because, at least, like I said, we all have a purpose to fulfill, and I'm walking out my purpose.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Walking out that purpose indeed. That's right. That's right indeed. Can use some more unity, especially nowadays, with all the nonsense going on the planet. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Need some more peanut butter and jelly as opposed to hot sauce and freaking, I don't know, horseradish. I don't even know where that even came from.
Well, yeah, wasabi and caramel, they don't go together. The other thing that I think is really kind of cool, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Dom, but is just what I've noticed since studying love. And I used to think there wasn't a place in the workplace for love. I definitely thought there's no place for love in the workplace. I'm constantly trying to make sure everybody keeps everything separate. I no longer believe that. And I know that, everyone has their own opinions, but in looking at love and how important it is for people to feel like their contribution is valued, like they're valued, like they're heard, like they're recognized. If you look up the word love in just a general dictionary, it generally talks about a passion or an emotion. And when you look at it from a biblical perspective, and some other religions too, I'm just going to talk about Christianity because that happens to be my faith. Love is about a choice. It's about decisions. Agape love is about, serving and just really seeking to honor others above self. And so that is absolutely what's needed in teams and communities. And it's the ultimate unifying force, is to look at others, listen to them, hear them, seek to understand, outdo yourself by showing honor to other people, even in the face of offense and opposition. And believe me, when I talk about it, I have failed at it so many times. And when I haven't failed at it, I've seen miracles on this earth. I know that when it comes to love in the workplace, as a human resources executive, I've really learned a lot. And I'd like to continue to appeal to people that may have in the past, and especially right now in the pandemic, the kind of environment where more people are open to talking about mental health, more people are talking about how do our emotions play into our successful contribution in the workplace? How do we maintain professionalism while we're still understanding that we bring our whole selves to work and our families and the different aspects? So when you think about the power of love and feeling heard and recognized and rewarded, and you think about glue, God's love unites everyone, the unifying opportunity related to teams and people's value and contribution, just to study, whether you agree with it all or not. This is my truth, and I believe it's other people's truths. and it's out of the intention to have the unity instead of the breakage and the division. And so when you do that, most people spend the majority of their time at their work, their labor, whatever that may be. And that amount of time, we want to create positive, nurturing, love-filled interactions where people are whole and healthy. And those are all factors in maximum contribution and productivity and engagement and morale. And when people are talking about great resignations and shifts in the workplace, well, it doesn't matter what stage of the kind of the workforce complexion that we're talking about. If people don't feel like you're listening and that there's a connection between the employer and the purpose of the organization and what they do, they're going to leave. And so it all flows between from love in the workplace to, are we going to attract and retain and have people stay at our company and with our team? They're absolutely related topics. And how you manage those relationships when they're under pressure and when there's adversity and when there are differences of opinions. That's when you want to apply something like glue.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. Yep, that's the beautiful thing about Unity. Heck, I even remember part of the book when. And the thing is, like, it's foundational principles, some we always need reminders of. Sometimes it's kind of like a coach always needing a coach, and heck, even part of the story where the mom and the kids were actually reminding her of what she needed to do to forgive her friend and everything like that. It's like, hey, sometimes like with Unity too, there's going to be some times where there's going to be some dips, where there's going to be some disagreements, and you just have to come back together and work through that disagreement. You may not feel like going through that rocky terrain, but hey, no smooth road comes without some rocky terrain every now and then, right?
Yes, and thank you so much for reading it. And it's a regular lesson that my husband and I are teaching to our children. And every time we quote teach it, I mean, to use air quotes, I don't want to, you learn. Every time you attempt, and I say attempt, because it's always funny.
That's the word
when you try to teach, you're always like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. I hope no one's watching me try to teach something, because it's just, you realize how far from a teacher you are. But I always try to envision that when you're weak, God's power is made perfect in us. And I have noticed that my children even tell me the fact that I know that you're far from saying you know how to do all these things helps them to receive it even more from us when we're talking about it. But the stories about the children, and the truth is I don't mean to offend anyone, but we're all really the same. We're children. When we get hurt and when things don't go the way that we would like them to go, a lot of times people they'll react poorly, and that destroys the unity in the environment. It goes on all different degrees and different levels of magnitude, but that's when fractures occur. And if no one decides to say something calming, something mature, and also stop to think about how this is maybe, all the stories that you create in your mind, and stop and look at the other person and prioritize them, then as much as all that may seem so intellectually simple, you're like, well, that's not very profound, Amy Kelly. That's just, it is profound, because what happens when no one stops is what we see in society today. Just completely, it goes so fast into places that you never imagined. And people are so far apart, when it just started out as this tiny little moment where no one wanted to listen to the other person, where no one wanted to put the other person above themselves because they were offended or in pain. And we all feel that. That isn't a judgment on anyone. It's a judgment on the human race, but not in a judgmental way. It's just that it's going to happen to everyone. So these simple things are things that we don't sometimes talk enough about, in order to empower people to say, I know exactly what to do when this happens. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to decide not to react and think about 5 steps ahead. What do I want to see? Do I want to see strife in my home, strife in my workplace, division, and more strife overall? Or do I want to make a decision to support the other individual, no matter how seemingly off kilter they might appear? And some people will say, well, that's crazy. What if someone is really wrong? Well, that will work itself out. But you were talking about the Bible, and in Matthew, it talks about, Jesus is asked, how many times do I forgive? 7 times? And Jesus is like, no, 7 times 77 times, which is basically just keep forgiving. And it's not because he's saying forgive everyone regardless of what they have done, even though that is the point. It's for the forgiver, the person who is going to spend all their time worrying and thinking and just ruminating over, why did they do that to me? I'm so mad. I'm so bitter. I've got all these things wrong. And that just spreads into everyone around them. So when it comes to glue, it's really for the forgiver and the forgiven, and the difference between a chain of people doing one thing versus the other, and what that looks like in our homes, our workplaces, and our society.
That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right. Things do work out eventually, even though it may feel like it takes forever from time to time.
Well, I don't think that we always get to see it all in this life. And some people have said, well, what if, my daughter actually read the story and tried to solve a disagreement, by continually humbling herself. And she was very hurt, just like anybody can get hurt. And I think the other party was also hurt. And she came back and said, it didn't work. And I said, you know what, Natalie, we won't always see things, definitely not immediately. But it is working. It is working inside you. You are making choices that change the construct of your soul, your spirit, and spiritually it is doing something. And you're right, the factor that we cannot at all control is time. We've got to wait on God's perfect timing. In the process, though, there is a sweet release, because as you forgive and as you think of things through the lens of the truth of Scripture and God's word, you won't feel the same. It's unexplainable sometimes, quote unquote, but yet undeniable. The peace that we feel as we start to forgive and truly look at things differently by, examining things through God's word and what he's telling us. And so while it may not result in a picture perfect, harmonious relationship based on the world's view, there is something being worked out in all of it. And there are relationships that I have that I thought I've been applying glue, but I haven't gotten the world's outcome, but I have gotten spiritual outcomes. And I'm still believing that ultimately there will be something that God is working on it, even when I'm not able to see it always.
Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right indeed. It's like a magical computer. You don't look at the motherboard every time you turn it on, depending on the computer. It's like, hey, things are working behind the scenes. Just got to be okay with that. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. So speaking of God, the love of God, since you're a fellow Christian, I always love to invite fellow Christians to give their salvation testimony on this show, because I'm all about that. So how'd you become a Christian, Amy?
Oh boy. Well, my youngest sister had been praying for me for years. And I did believe in God, but I did not have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And in 1999, some things happened in my life that I have a couple different Bibles. And recently I ran over some deer, and I'm going to come back around, Dom. I promise you, I'm going to come back around to my salvation story. But I ran over, unfortunately, 2 deer in the middle of the night, taking my son's friends home. And what happened was we had to take the car into the shop because it was an unfortunate occurrence on all sides. And while the car was there, I had left my Bible bag by accident. I have my Wednesday night Bible study bag with my journal and my Bible and, my devotional and in the car. So I had to I have a couple other Bibles. And I opened up one of my backup Bibles, and it was reminding me of this salvation time, because my Bible was given to me by this drug addict back in 1999. And I had met him through, I'd been involved in a support group for, a couple different things that I was involved in at the time, relationship wise, and just the cycle of life. And I found myself in this group of people that had some certain types of problems. I had a different problem, but nonetheless, we were all in the same room. And when he just kind of fell into the middle of the circle and said, here is my Bible, and I want to give it to you. And he wrote in it, and it's all misspelled, and it's just kind of a crazy inscription, but it said, from the Lord Jesus to Amy on your new journey, JORNY. And when I received that was really when I accepted Christ. And I just knew that I was on a different path. And from that time on, my mom passed away in the next year or two. Lots of things happened after that. But that was the moment when I knew that I had a relationship instead of a ritual when it came to religion. And that was in 1999, December of 1999. And so that was 22 years ago almost.
What happened? Anniversary indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Kind of interesting. First time hearing that type of story where it's like, oh, we're all in a support group together and just somebody out of nowhere, spiritual revelation, like, hey, take this book, you're going to need it. It's like, what about you? Don't you want to keep your own copy? Like, nah, you take it. That's right.
What was interesting about that was when I opened it up, Dom, I opened it up and it was almost 21 or 2 years to the day when it had been given to me. After I would have not been in that Bible in a while. I had it, I used it, but I had been given a Bible as a gift from a pastor that my husband and I both really highly regard. And he had written in it and he had my name stamped on that one. So I had been using that one, and it had a bunch of new kind of QR things too in it where I could like QR it and these lessons would come up. So I had been using that Bible. And when I went back to this other Bible and opened it up, it was that day, that many years ago. And it was really interesting that was how that all went down. So there's a lot more to my salvation story than what I said today. And I'd be happy to share it with anyone who reaches out to me. But there are other people involved, and I don't want to, divulge all the different people's, personal stories. But it went from me just going to church and thinking that's how you earned your salvation, to understanding the truth and the power of grace and the gift that we have through Jesus' sacrifice. So that was a change, of course, and it's been different ever since.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. Yeah, because as you're saying 1999, I was like, oh, we're going to get a Y2K story. All right, bring it on. But it's like, not a.
Yeah, I'll give you some other elements. I mean, there's definitely stories are great. It's a good question. And I'm sure you ask it for a reason, because there's so much and everyone's so rich. I was engaged to one person in 1999, and I was engaged to my now husband of 22 years, 2.5 months later. And we got married that same year. And we've been married ever since and have our 4 children. So, it's really amazing how just puts you on the right path, and it's beautiful.
Well, I guess that's going in the business book about relationships in the future, huh?
Well, I think that it's a good laugh, but it's also true that I mention it in glue because I've seen it the reality is everyone's business. Like I said, it needs to be professional, but we all bring our whole person to our work. And if you really care about your work, I care about my work, then you do bring who you are into that work. So it's exciting. And I remember in Erin Brockovich, the movie, she's talking to her boss, and someone says, it's not personal, it's just business. And the character says a whole bunch of colorful words that I'm not going to use, but she said, I leave everyone I love to come here, wherever that place was, for this many hours and do everything I do to take care of them. This is very personal to me, and I do care about what I do. So my point is, work and personal is intermixed. We have to have some emotional intelligence and the ability to understand how to be productive in both environments in order to be a blessing wherever we go. But as far as having this division, I don't believe that it's actually completely healthy to have total division. There's just a level of appropriate management of your communication that's necessary, but you're bringing your personal self to your home life, and you bring some of your work home sometimes, even though people say, oh, I don't do that. And then when you go to the office, a lot of times when we're dealing with personnel issues and when we're dealing with strife in the workplace, it's because people are under stress in other areas of their lives. So acknowledging that is actually a good thing. Pretending like that doesn't exist is just perpetuating things that are not true. Because a lot of times when things happen in the workplace, it's because people are under pressure in other areas.
So diamond mining and making. All right. That's what it sounds like to me. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. But yeah, you're so right about that. Yeah, because the thing is, like, you could try to separate the two, the personal and the professional, but they're going to blend and bleed into each other regardless, no matter how hard you try to separate the two. Like if you're going through something, it always going to show up in your work in different ways. And if you've been around folks for a while, they're going to notice the change in your behavior. And if something at work is making you mad, it's going to show up at work. Even if you try to do some deep breathing, there's still going to be some ways. That's right indeed. That's right That's right, indeed. Well, and speaking of fabulous books, since we've been talking about that's been the main conversation, I've been liking to ask guests this particular question. So, if the book Glue was a food item, what would it be and why?
A food item?
Yeah.
I would say it's bread. It's bread. It's a daily bread type book. I don't mean to say that it's sustenance for everyone. I just mean that for someone at the right time, my hope is that it is a daily bread item, meaning at the right time when you need a prompt to be prepared in the near future or in the moment to respond differently to a broken relationship, or even I talk about in the book when people, something I've seen a lot in business is where someone says, "You stole my idea. It was my idea to put a hole in the middle of a cake and call it a donut. How could you do that?" Or "It was my idea to take 2 pieces of bread and put ham in the middle. I penned the ham sandwich. That's my idea." Well, I don't mean to make too light of it, but there are a lot of situations where people disagree because they think there's stolen property in the form of ideas. And sometimes I know that's very serious, but there are times when that is just anyone, the pen, the pencil, it's already been invented. If you invent a green pencil, it's not because you stole it from the person who had a purple pencil, if that was the case. So when I think about the food item, it's a simple daily bread, but it's the most important thing when it comes to don't succumb to the bait to get upset over the things that are inevitable, meaning you're going to disagree. You're going to have someone who thinks they have the same idea that you had or vice versa. And what do you want? Do you want that to cause an earthquake and a fracture and just a separation? Or do you want to be able to say, "I'm happy for you," and really mean it? Not just a falsehood, but just say, "You know what? This is going to be okay. Whatever happens, it might be my idea." And I'm not talking about the intellectual property for the cure for cancer, which is something that should be patented. And I'm talking about a lot of times people are having the same general thoughts. They're disagreeing over things because they wanted something and they didn't get their way. It can happen to any of us. And instead of being able to say, "Oh, there are more important things," making sure than being angry and getting upset and causing these big divisions, let's just be able to handle it in a different fashion. Let's prioritize peace of mind, peace in the workplace, peace in our home life, peace in our community, and still be able to have the vibrant conversations that drive great ideas and be able to disagree, be able to not even have, not agree, but still be able to coexist and to align and support each other. And these are not new thoughts. I know these are topics that have been discussed for hundreds of years, but it is more important than ever in the workplace to have people who can say, "I'm going to apply glue. I'm going to bond. I'm going to unite. I'm not going to call everyone I know, email everyone I know, say how mad I am, how offended I am, how much I'm going to do something about this," and say, "All right, I really want to understand a little bit more because obviously this is important to the other person too."
There we go. Some bread of heaven right there, folks. That's right. So you're getting a whole loaf with this one, y'all. That's right. You're getting a whole loaf indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Best bread ever. That's right indeed. That's right. Baker approved. That's right. Baker approved indeed. Yeah, because I also think it's like, all right, so glue, it's sticky. All right. She's going to say honey. She's going to say honey. Oh, she said bread. Okay. All right.
I know. I knew. I thought about it. I had some other ones. I was thinking about Reese's peanut butter cups, but those are, they're too good. They're too good. But I was thinking, I don't know how natural they are. They may not be really made of peanut butter, but I don't care. They're still yummy. But that's not the book.
Yeah. That's true. Definitely true indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Especially if you leave the bread out for too long and it becomes as hard as a brick. Don't want that to happen.
Everything has its time. We talked about that. Everything has its time. You're right. Bread isn't always, you got to eat it on a daily basis and then move on. And especially when you're talking about people wandering in the wilderness, right? Thinking about manna. But what I mean is just, it's meant to be a daily commitment to being glue versus succumbing to the voice that tells you to divide.
So I'm talking about, indeed. That's right. That's right, indeed. Well, we definitely got to have you back in the future. You're freaking amazing. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So definitely, when that other book comes out, definitely got to have you back on the show. And since you mentioned time, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is, if you're to wake up tomorrow and you're 25 again, but you're in 2022 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
I really did give it in this book, because prioritize love more than getting upset by things. I really would give that to myself and to everybody else. It's easy to complicate the simple, and that's it.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's right. Have a big old heart, y'all. That's right. That's right, indeed. Have that love in your life, indeed. That unconditional love, indeed. Love your neighbor. That's right. That's right. Even if you want to do the introvert thing and be like, hey, like a good neighbor, stay over there. Like, hey, even though with that, like, have some good love for them, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness. So for those who want to keep in contact with you and all the stuff that you're doing to help out individuals and companies become their best selves ever, what's the best way for folks to do so?
To email me at amypkelly@amypkelly.com.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. Shoot Amy an email. Head over to a wonderful website, amypkelly.com. Heck, you might even share that story of how the heck she went from one fiance to another in 2.5 months. That's definitely...
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for highlighting that part of the story. Thanks for bringing that back to the forefront, just to make sure. 2 wonderful people involved. Actually, 3, if you include me. But that other person, they don't need to be drawn into this. But you're right. That's a fact. And my other book website that I'm just going to talk right is gluebondandunite.com. Gluebondandunite.com. And you're right. And I actually think it would be good, because I've heard some other fiance stories, and Lord willing, everyone turns out for the better in all of them. But yes, Jim Kelly, my spouse, we've been married for 22 years.
You can't just say a hot sentence like that and let me not forget about it. I was going to bring it back up.
It's okay. I was like, thanks a lot. Thank you. I was being vulnerable with you. I gave you a lot of stuff. And, you're like, there were 4 weeks between when Amy P. Kelly was engaged to one man, and then she decided to turn it around. It's okay. I know I'm not alone.
Yeah, exactly. It's like sometimes, times are better with other people, and it's good to make that decision at the right time, so that way everybody involved will go and meet the right people. Yes, indeed. Because folks will be like, man, how the heck did she find him in 2 freaking months? I can't find a guy in 2 freaking years.
Listen, I didn't know you were going to do a Netflix special on this whole thing, like a stand-up. Is that what you were... Listen, the most important thing is I think everyone involved is completely fine. That was in 1999. That was a long time ago. As my children say, that was in the 19s. That's like ancient history. No one even cares. But the good news is I got the Bible out of it. I have that amazing experience to look back on. And it is fun because, someone was telling me something the other day, and they didn't want to tell me, and they whispered. They said, well, I was engaged to someone else before I got married. And I said, it happens. It really does happen. And you're going to be okay. Everybody's going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's human life. None of us get it right. None of us.
Lots of good people involved.
That's why we got God, so we can have our lives better than what it would be if without him.
Yes.
So any parting words before we close up shop, Amy?
I would definitely just say thank you to you. In all seriousness, we're having a great time, and I've shared a lot of little factoids along the way. The truth is, thank you for you fulfilling your purpose. The Lord will fulfill your purpose for you, for everyone. And my life verse is Jeremiah 33:3. And it says, Lord, I cry out to you to show me the great and mighty things that I do not know. And so even as I promote a book, honestly, talk about other people's books and all the amazing things that go along with it, that's the answer, is to wait and to listen, because none of us know. We do not know. We know the one who does know. And I encourage anyone not to rely on any of these books. I hope they are helpful, beneficial, enjoyable, and ultimately to do what it says in that scripture is cry out to the Lord, because he's the one that has the answers, nobody else.
Thanks a bunch for tuning in and setting aside some of your time to listen to this wonderful podcast, Going North. If you really enjoyed what you heard, do me a solid and share this with your network and someone that you care about that would get something out of it too. And be sure to subscribe to hear more, and heck, even check out the backlog if you would like, because there are hundreds of episodes to choose from, and they just keep getting better and not butter.